Earth we know, a cradle of life and a canvas of intricate ecosystems, was not always so serene. Its birth was a spectacle of cosmic violence, a furious ballet of debris in the early solar system. Billions of years ago, our planet was an infant, molten and seething, a far cry from the blue marble we recognize today. Imagine the raw materials of countless worlds scattered across a vast, spinning disk of gas and dust, the accretion disk surrounding a newborn sun. Within this chaotic expanse, gravity was the sculptor, pulling these primordial fragments together. These were the planetesimals, building blocks of planets, each a world in miniature, colliding, merging, and growing. The forces at play were immense. Impacts were not gentle nudges, but cataclysmic events, each collision releasing unimaginable heat, melting rock and vaporizing elements. The nascent Earth was a celestial forge, a relentless hammering that condensed its mass and set the stage for its internal differentiation. The very ground beneath your feet, if you could have stood upon it then, would have been a fiery ocean of liquid rock. This ceaseless bombardment was the genesis of its form, a violent kneading that prepared its very substance. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos. Now let's keep going. As the planet continued to grow, a crucial process began: differentiation. The immense pressures and temperatures within the molten Earth caused its constituent materials to separate based on density. Heavier elements, like iron and nickel, sank towards the center, forming the planet's core. Lighter silicates rose, creating the mantle, and eventually the nascent crust. This layering was not a gentle settling, but a churning, a slow, inexorable segregation, driven by the fundamental forces of physics. The atmosphere that began to form was a far cry from the breathable air we depend on. It was a toxic brew, dominated by volcanic gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur compounds exuded from the planet's molten interior. Imagine a sky thick with perpetual twilight, lit by the glow of active volcanoes and constant meteor showers. The surface was a desolate panorama of red-hot rock and steaming vents, a world perpetually being remade. But even in this inferno, the seeds of habitability were being sown. The origin of water, the very essence of life as we understand it, remains one of science's most profound mysteries. How did this vital molecule arrive on a planet born in such searing heat? One compelling theory suggests that water was delivered by comets and asteroids, icy wanderers that rained down upon the young Earth, their frozen cargo slowly melting and accumulating over eons. These celestial visitors, remnants of the solar system's formation, acted as cosmic water carriers. Another possibility lies within the Earth itself. Volcanic outgassing, the continuous release of gases from the planet's interior, could have also contributed significantly to the early atmosphere and oceans. Water vapor, trapped deep within the planet's mantle, would have been released during volcanic eruptions, gradually condensing as the Earth cooled. The journey of water to our planet is a tale written in the stars and etched into the very rocks. As the surface began to cool, perhaps a thin, brittle crust formed, only to be shattered and reformed by subsequent impacts or volcanic activity. It was within these early, primordial oceans, warmed by geothermal energy and bathed in ultraviolet radiation, that the most extraordinary transition may have occurred. The leap from non-living chemistry to life itself. How did simple, inorganic molecules, under the relentless energy bombardment and in the presence of abundant chemical building blocks, begin to organize themselves into something that could replicate? This is the enigma of abiogenesis, the moment when inert matter gained the spark of self-preservation and propagation. It is a transition so profound, so fundamental, that its precise mechanics remain veiled in the mists of deep time. The building blocks were there, the energy was abundant, but the blueprint for life, the secret code of self-replication, how did it emerge from the primal soup? And to understand the next stage of this unfolding mystery, we must look beyond the immediate aftermath of Earth's formation and consider the great planetary shifts that followed, particularly the arrival of heavier elements that would shape our world. We stand now on a world transformed, yet still utterly alien. The violent chaos of planetary formation has subsided, replaced by a steady, relentless geological pulse. Into this ancient crucible, life, in its most rudimentary form, has taken hold. This is the Archean Aeon, a chapter in Earth's story, written not in grand epics of towering mountains or vast, shifting oceans, but in the silent, pervasive dominion of single-celled organisms. Imagine an Earth teeming with life, yet utterly devoid of the air we breathe. This was a planet bathed in a different kind of light, a world where the very chemistry of the atmosphere was being dictated by the earliest metabolic processes. The atmosphere of the Archean was a thick, unbreathable shroud, rich in gases like methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, but almost entirely lacking in free oxygen. Life then was exclusively anaerobic, thriving in environments that would be toxic to most organisms today. These early microbes, simple yet astonishingly resilient, adapted to a low-energy existence. They were the pioneers, the first to exploit the available chemical gradients, drawing sustenance from volcanic vents, dissolved minerals, and the faint sunlight that penetrated the young atmosphere. They existed in dense microbial mats, communities of incredible complexity, clinging to shallow seabeds and shorelines. These were not passive inhabitants. They were active architects, their collective biochemical activities slowly but surely beginning to etch their signature onto the planet's surface. and its very chemistry. Consider the stromatolites not as mere curiosities, but as the monumental achievements of these primordial microbial empires. These layered structures, built by successive generations of cyanobacteria and other microorganisms, are among the oldest recognizable fossils on Earth, stretching back billions of years. They formed in shallow marine environments, where the microbes would trap sediment particles, binding them together with sticky organic compounds. As new layers of microbes grew on top, they would form dome-like or columnar structures. These living reefs, invisible to us now in their original form, were the dominant geological agents of their time. They were the first great builders, shaping coastlines and influencing the flow of ancient waters. The significance of stromatolites extends far beyond their physical form. They are profound biosignatures, direct evidence of life's earliest profound impact on the planet. Within their layered matrices, we find not just the fossilized remains of the organisms themselves, but also the chemical traces of their metabolic processes. These ancient microbes, in their relentless pursuit of energy and sustenance, were already beginning to alter the planet's chemical balance, laying the groundwork for transformations that would unfold over eons. They were the quiet engineers of an early Earth, their actions subtle but world-altering, their existence etched into stone, whispers of a time when life was not just present, but actively sculpting its environment. And it is within these microbial mats, within the very biochemistry of these ancient life forms, that a radical innovation was slowly taking root, a metabolic pathway so revolutionary, so potent, that it would fundamentally change the destiny of Earth. This was the dawning of photosynthesis, the ability to harness solar energy directly, to split water molecules and release a byproduct that was, to the prevailing anaerobic life, a potent poison. This emergent process, like a slow-burning fuse, held within it the seeds of an atmospheric revolution. Its implications were not immediate, not a sudden eruption, but a gradual accumulation, a patient, persistent alteration of the very air itself, the Archean microbial world, through activities like stromatolite formation and the nascent stages of photosynthesis, was far from a static environment. These single-celled pioneers were not merely surviving, they were profoundly reshaping Earth's geology and chemistry. Their metabolic byproducts, like the oxygen produced by early photosynthetic organisms, began to accumulate, albeit slowly, in isolated pockets. This gradual chemical alteration, driven by the relentless activity of microscopic life, was the precursor to a planetary transformation. It was a slow awakening, a subtle preparation for the dramatic shifts that lay ahead. But to truly grasp the scope of this microbial dominion, we must delve deeper into how these tiny architects fundamentally altered the planet's crust and atmosphere, setting the stage for the next great chapter Proterozoic Eon, a vast expanse stretching from 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago, witnessed a dramatic reordering of our planet. It was an era defined by monumental geological forces and the slow, persistent emergence of life's grander designs. The Earth's crust, long a chaotic patchwork, began to coalesce. Tectonic plates, driven by the planet's internal heat, began their slow, inexorable dance, gathering continental fragments into massive landmasses. One of the most significant events was the assembly of supercontinents. Imagine vast swathes of land, miles thick, grinding together, forming colossal mountain ranges that dwarfed anything we see today. Rodinia, one of the earliest recognized supercontinents, emerged and then, over hundreds of millions of years, began to fragment. This cyclical process of assembly and dispersal was not merely a geological spectacle. It profoundly influenced global climate. When continents clustered together, vast interior regions became arid and harsh, while glaciation could easily spread from high latitudes. When they dispersed, oceans could circulate more freely, redistributing heat and moisture, and influencing the very chemistry of the seas. These tectonic shifts were the planet's deep breathing, each inhale and exhale altering the conditions for life. But as continents formed and reformed, a more subtle, yet equally profound, transformation was occurring within the microscopic realm. The single-celled organisms of the Archean, robust and resilient, had paved the way, but now a new kind of cell was emerging. The leap to eukaryotic cells marked a fundamental shift in life's architecture. These cells, unlike the simpler prokaryotes, possessed internal compartments, organelles, each with specialized functions. The nucleus, housing the genetic material, was a groundbreaking innovation, a protected sanctuary for DNA. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, and in plant cells, chloroplasts, the sites of photosynthesis, granted eukaryotes a level of energy efficiency and complexity previously unimaginable. This internal complexity was more than just a biological curiosity. It was the evolutionary precursor to multicellularity, with self-contained energy factories and compartmentalized processes. Eukaryotic cells could begin to cooperate, to specialize, and to form larger, more intricate structures. The stage was being set for a bolder, more ambitious phase of life, one that would move beyond the single-celled existence that had dominated Earth for billions of years. Yet this dawning complexity was not a smooth, unbroken ascent. The planet itself endured periods of unimaginable upheaval, testing the resilience of even these developing life forms. The Proterozoic is also an epoch famously marked by the snowball Earth paradox. Picture this: for extended periods, perhaps millions of years, the entire planet was encased in a thick shell of ice, from pole to pole. oceans frozen solid, continents buried under kilometers of snow and ice. How could life, even the hardy microbial life of the time, possibly survive such an extreme event? The causes are still debated. A dramatic shift in atmospheric composition, perhaps a decrease in greenhouse gases, or a change in Earth's orbit, could have triggered a runaway ice age. The consequences were devastating, yet paradoxically, these extreme glaciations may have played a crucial role in life's subsequent evolution. When the ice finally receded, perhaps due to volcanic outgassing, accumulating in the atmosphere and warming the planet, it left behind a world chemically altered. The slow weathering of rocks underneath the ice, combined with the release of gases, created oceans rich in nutrients and minerals. This post-snowball Earth environment, brimming with potential, provided the perfect conditions for a surge in biological innovation. For the first time, the conditions were becoming truly favorable for the emergence of complex, multicellular organisms. To understand the precise nature of these nascent complex life forms and the conditions that finally allowed them to flourish, we must turn our gaze to the geological and environmental circumstances that directly preceded the explosion of animal life. A pivotal moment we explore next. The oceans, once a canvas of microbial empires and simple, soft-bodied life, were about to erupt, following the dramatic climatic shifts of the Proterozoic. A profound transformation was underway. The very fabric of life was being rewoven at an unprecedented speed. Imagine the primordial seas stretching across the planet, suddenly becoming a crucible of innovation. This was the dawn of a new era, a biological Big Bang where complex organisms with specialized tissues and distinct body plans emerged not over eons, but in a geological blink. It was as if evolution had suddenly been handed new tools, new blueprints, and an immense deadline. The fossil record, once muted, begins to roar with the appearance of creatures bearing hard parts. Suddenly, we see skeletons, shells, and exoskeletons. These were not mere single cells or simple. Life, having orchestrated its grand symphony in the Cambrian seas, now cast its gaze towards the shimmering, alien horizon, the land. For billions of years, the continents had stood as barren, silent monoliths, untouched by the vibrant pulse of biology. The oceans teemed with nascent forms, a testament to relentless innovation. Yet the terrestrial realm remained a stark and unforgiving void. But the very success of life in the water had created a potent, irresistible pressure. Resources, though abundant, were not infinite. Competition, a silent sculptor of evolution, drove relentless exploration. The edges of the world, the intertidal zones, became the testing grounds, the stepping stones for a truly epical transition. The journey from water to land was not a gentle seep, but a desperate, calculated leap. Imagine the sheer audacity required. Water had been life's perfect cradle, providing buoyancy against the crushing pull of gravity, and a medium for respiration, nutrient transport, and reproduction. To venture onto land meant facing a relentless assault from the sun's drying rays, a constant threat of desiccation that could shrivel the very essence of being. Gravity, once a gentle nudge, became a heavy, unyielding burden, demanding new structural supports and ways to move. And respiration, so effortless within the aqueous embrace, required a complete overhaul, a radical reimagining of how to draw the breath of life from a thin, gaseous atmosphere. The first pioneers were undoubtedly humble. Plants, seeking the unfiltered sunlight that bathed the land, began to creep from the watery margins. These were not the verdant forests of later ages. Think of simple, algal-like forms, perhaps clinging to damp rocks, lacking true roots for anchorage and water absorption, and devoid of leaves for efficient photosynthesis. Reproduction was a precarious affair, often relying on water for the dispersal of gametes, tethering them still to the wettest niches. Alongside these pioneering flora came the first terrestrial explorers among the animals, arthropods, already thriving in the Cambrian seas with their segmented bodies and exoskeletons, found the emerging plant mats an irresistible new food source and habitat. They too faced the challenges of drying out, of moving with newfound weight, but their pre-existing armor offered a significant advantage. These nascent terrestrial ecosystems were, by our modern standards, incredibly sparse and simple, yet they represented a radical departure. Life was no longer confined to the blue vastness. The land, once a silent stage, was beginning to host its own tentative drama. This new frontier, however, was not a kindly welcome. The exposure to the elements, the unfiltered radiation, the lack of protective depth, all presented a constant, immediate danger. Survival here demanded a level of resilience and adaptation far beyond what was needed in the ocean's forgiving embrace. The evolutionary arms race, which had already begun in the seas, would now intensify on this exposed, sun-baked stage. Even as life began its bold, hesitant steps onto the continents, the ocean remained the undisputed center of evolutionary power and complexity. The innovations, the sheer diversity of forms, still overwhelmingly resided in the vast marine realms. The land was a nascent experiment, a challenging annex to the ancient, established dominion of the seas. The very organisms that ventured ashore were often descendants of marine lineages, their fundamental biology still deeply imprinted by their aquatic heritage. The evolutionary pressures that drove them onto land were often extensions of pressures already at play in the ocean. To truly understand the burgeoning terrestrial life, we must continue to look to the deep currents and ancient rhythms that still dictated the pace of change. and to explore how this dependence on the marine world shaped the very first forests and the strange creatures that inhaled the air for the first time, a transition that beckons us to explore the burgeoning world of the Silurian seas and their profound impact. Life, having orchestrated its grand symphony in the Cambrian seas, now cast its gaze towards the shimmering, alien horizon, the land. For billions of years, the continents had stood as barren, silent monoliths, untouched by the vibrant pulse of biology. The oceans teemed with nascent forms, a testament to relentless innovation. Yet the terrestrial realm remained a stark and unforgiving void. But the very success of life in the water had created a potent, irresistible pressure. Resources, though abundant, were not infinite. Competition, a silent sculptor of evolution, drove relentless exploration. The edges of the world, the intertidal zones, became the testing grounds, the stepping stones for a truly epical transition. The journey from water to land was not a gentle seep, but a desperate, calculated leap. Imagine the sheer audacity required. Water had been life's perfect cradle, providing buoyancy against the crushing pull of gravity, and a medium for respiration, nutrient transport, and reproduction. To venture onto land meant facing a relentless assault from the sun's drying rays, a constant threat of desiccation that could shrivel the very essence of being. Gravity, once a gentle nudge, became a heavy, unyielding burden, demanding new structural supports and ways to move. And respiration, so effortless within the aqueous embrace, required a complete overhaul, a radical reimagining of how to draw the breath of life from a thin, gaseous atmosphere. The first pioneers were undoubtedly humble. Plants, seeking the unfiltered sunlight that bathed the land, began to creep from the watery margins. These were not the verdant forests of later ages. Think of simple, algal-like forms, perhaps clinging to damp rocks, lacking true roots for anchorage and water absorption, and devoid of leaves for efficient photosynthesis. Reproduction was a precarious affair, often relying on water for the dispersal of gametes, tethering them still to the wettest niches. Alongside these pioneering flora came the first terrestrial explorers among the animals, arthropods, already thriving in the Cambrian seas with their segmented bodies and exoskeletons, found the emerging plant mats an irresistible new food source and habitat. They too faced the challenges of drying out, of moving with newfound weight, but their pre-existing armor offered a significant advantage. These nascent terrestrial ecosystems were, by our modern standards, incredibly sparse and simple, yet they represented a radical departure. Life was no longer confined to the blue vastness. The land, once a silent stage, was beginning to host its own tentative drama. This new frontier, however, was not a kindly welcome. The exposure to the elements, the unfiltered radiation, the lack of protective depth, all presented a constant, immediate danger. Survival here demanded a level of resilience and adaptation far beyond what was needed in the ocean's forgiving embrace. The evolutionary arms race, which had already begun in the seas, would now intensify on this exposed, sun-baked stage. Even as life began its bold, hesitant steps onto the continents, the ocean remained the undisputed center of evolutionary power and complexity. The innovations, the sheer diversity of forms, still overwhelmingly resided in the vast marine realms. The land was a nascent experiment, a challenging annex to the ancient, established dominion of the seas. The very organisms that ventured ashore were often descendants of marine lineages, their fundamental biology still deeply imprinted by their aquatic heritage. The evolutionary pressures that drove them onto land were often extensions of pressures already at play in the ocean. To truly understand the burgeoning terrestrial life, we must continue to look to the deep currents and ancient rhythms that still dictated the pace of change, and to explore how this dependence on the marine world shaped the very first forests and the strange creatures that inhaled the air for the first time, a transition that beckons us to explore the burgeoning world of the Silurian seas and their profound impact. A breath of air, thick and humid, hung heavy over a world transformed. The land, once a tentative frontier, had become a vast, verdant empire. We stand now in the Carboniferous period, a time sculpted not by fire or ice, but by an explosion of green, a relentless surge of plant life that would fundamentally reshape our planet's atmosphere and life itself. This was an era defined by colossal forests, ecosystems so dense and so vast they laid the very foundations of the coal seams we mine today. Imagine a landscape painted in shades of emerald and deep forest green, a humid, sprawling tapestry woven from plants that dwarfed anything seen before. The air itself felt different, richer, a testament to the ceaseless, quiet work of photosynthesis on a planetary scale. Here, the ground was a spongy mat of decaying organic matter, perpetually saturated, a fertile cradle for life's next grand experiment. The dominant architects of this new world were not the delicate flowers of later epochs, but the ancient lineages of spore-bearing plants, towering club mosses known as lycopods, reached heights of over 100 feet, their segmented trunks forming dense stands that crowded out the sky. These were not the small, ground-hugging plants familiar to us today. They were tree-sized monoliths, their leafy crowns creating a high canopy, a sealed world beneath. Alongside them grew immense ferns, their fronds unfurling with a prehistoric elegance. And along waterways, giant horsetails, their hollow, ribbed stems forming thickets so dense they would have been nigh impassable. These plants were incredibly efficient at capturing sunlight. Their rapid growth and proliferation fueled by abundant carbon dioxide and a stable, warm climate. But within this lush abundance, a peculiar tension began to form. The sheer scale of plant life meant an unprecedented amount of carbon was being drawn from the atmosphere and locked away in biomass, and eventually in the accumulating layers of peat that would become coal. This process began to subtly alter the very air we breathe. Think of it as the planet taking a long, deep inhalation, its atmospheric composition shifting in response to this verdant expansion. And as the carbon dioxide levels dipped, another gas began to climb, a gas that would allow for spectacular and frankly unsettling evolutionary leaps. This rising gas was oxygen, and its increasing presence in the atmosphere would have profound implications, not just for plant life, but for the creatures that would soon venture further into this green labyrinth. The foundations of a new kind of life were being laid, one that would eventually leave the water behind entirely. To understand how this happened, we must look to the creatures that thrived in these ancient, humid swamps, the early pioneers of a terrestrial existence. In the shadowy, waterlogged depths of these carboniferous swamps, a new order was emerging. The amphibians, having made their tentative forays onto land during the Silurian, now found themselves in an evolutionary paradise. The warm, humid conditions, the abundance of insect prey, and the relative lack of competition from other tetrapods allowed them to diversify dramatically. These were not the small, timid creatures we might imagine. Some grew to considerable sizes, reaching lengths of up to 20 feet. Formidable predators with powerful jaws and sharp teeth. They were the undisputed rulers of these marshy realms, their lives still tied to the water for reproduction and respiration, but their bodies increasingly adapted for life on land. Imagine lumbering giants moving through shallow waters, their skin moist and permeable, absorbing oxygen from the water and the humid air. They were masters of their environment, perfectly suited to the slow-moving rivers and stagnant pools that characterized the Carboniferous landscape. Their diets consisted of the abundant arthropods that also flourished in this oxygen-rich world, and perhaps even smaller amphibians. Their very presence underscored the slow, inexorable march of vertebrate evolution, a gradual shedding of aquatic dependence, a tentative embrace of a new domain. But their continued reliance on damp environments represented a significant evolutionary bottleneck. A truly successful terrestrial vertebrate would need to overcome this fundamental limitation. Its life cycle no longer dictated by the proximity of water. This is where a simple, yet revolutionary, innovation would change everything. The true breakthrough, the evolutionary leap that would unshakable liberate vertebrates from the watery embrace forever, arrived with the amniotic egg. This was a profound departure from the amphibian egg, which required constant moisture prevent desiccation. The amniotic egg was a self-contained world, a miniature biosphere designed for life on dry land. It possessed a protective shell, a leathery or calcified membrane that kept the embryo moist while allowing for gas exchange. Inside, a series of specialized membranes developed. The amnion, which enclosed the embryo in a fluid-filled sac, the yolk sac, providing nourishment, and the allantois, a sac for storing waste products and facilitating respiration. This single innovation was a game changer. It meant that future generations could be laid and developed entirely away from water, opening up vast new territories for exploration and colonization. No longer were these creatures confined to the edges of rivers and swamps. They could now inhabit the drier interiors of continents, expanding their ecological niches and evolutionary possibilities exponentially. This adaptation was the true genesis of the reptile, and by extension, all its descendants, including birds and mammals. It was a quiet revolution, unfolding in the humid undergrowth of these ancient forests, a testament to nature's relentless drive to find new ways to persist and proliferate. The implications of this shift were immense, but the Carboniferous world was also undergoing a dramatic change in its atmosphere, a change that directly influenced the evolution of its inhabitants. The relentless activity of these colossal forests, breathing in carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen, had a profound impact on the planet's atmosphere. Oxygen levels, which had been gradually increasing during the Devonian, now soared. They climbed to unprecedented heights, reaching levels perhaps as high as 35%, compared to the 21% we experience today. This oxygen-rich atmosphere had a direct and astonishing effect on the invertebrate world, particularly the arthropods. Without the same respiratory limitations as vertebrates, insects and other arthropods flourished in this superoxygenated air. Imagine dragonflies with wingspans of over 2 feet, millipedes that stretch to 6 feet in length, and spiders capable of preying on small vertebrates. These were not anomalies, but the norm in this oxygen-rich environment, a testament to the fundamental role of atmospheric composition in shaping life. The sheer scale of these creatures is a stark reminder of how different Earth's environments have been throughout its history. This period, so rich in plant life and so saturated with oxygen, created a unique set of evolutionary pressures and opportunities. It was a planet breathing deeply, its atmosphere a crucible for radical biological innovation. But this era of giant flora and oxygen-fed gigantism was a temporary state, a delicate balance that would eventually shift, leading to the formation of the very coal we depend on today, and setting the stage for the next chapter in vertebrate evolution. To understand this transition, we must consider the eventual fate of these vast forests and the profound geological legacy they would leave behind. The air, once thick with the scent of ancient forests and the hum of insect life, began to change. A profound stillness descended, a prelude to an unimaginable emptiness. The Carboniferous world, a vibrant testament to life's tenacity, teetered on the precipice of an event so profound, so absolute, that it would redefine the very meaning of survival on Earth. We have witnessed epochs of burgeoning life, of evolutionary leaps, and the slow, majestic sculpting of continents. But now we turn our gaze to a turning point, a chasm in the fossil record, a moment when the planet itself seemed to recoil from the abundance it had fostered. This was not a gradual decline, but a swift, catastrophic unraveling. The primary architect of this unraveling, the catalyst for the largest single loss of life the Earth has ever known, was a geological catastrophe of unfathomable scale. Deep within the Siberian landmass, a series of immense volcanic eruptions began. These were not ordinary volcanoes, but the Siberian Traps, a colossal event that spewed forth lava and gas for hundreds of thousands of years. Imagine an area larger than Western Europe being inundated with molten rock. This was a planetary fever dream, a churning, boiling cauldron that pierced the crust and unleashed its fury upon the sky. The sheer volume of basaltic lava that poured out was enough to bury entire regions, reshaping landscapes at a speed that defied geological time. But the lava itself was only part of the story. The true killer was what these eruptions released into the atmosphere. Billions of tons of greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide and methane, billowed outward from the erupting fissures. These gases, trapped for eons beneath the Earth's surface, now flooded the atmosphere. The delicate balance that had sustained the lush Carboniferous world was shattered. These gases acted like a thickening blanket, trapping solar radiation and sending global temperatures soaring. The planet began to cook. Oceans, once teeming with life, were warmed to levels previously thought impossible, their dissolved oxygen vanishing. This process, known as ocean acidification, weakened and killed the shells of marine organisms. Then came a suffocating wave of anoxia, a severe depletion of oxygen in the water, rendering vast swathes of the oceans uninhabitable. As the atmosphere thickened with volcanic aerosols and greenhouse gases, the vibrant green of the Carboniferous forests began to fade. Plants, unable to cope with the extreme heat and altered atmospheric chemistry, withered and died. The intricate web of life, so carefully woven, began to fray. Land animals, adapted to a cooler, oxygen-rich world, found themselves gasping for breath in a furnace. The very air turned toxic, not just in its composition, but in its pervasive, deadly silence. The great insect giants of the Carboniferous, whose roars once filled the air, were among the first to fall. their oxygen-dependent biology could no longer find purchase in the depleted atmosphere. The aftermath was a landscape of desolation. The fossil record, so rich and detailed in the preceding eras, becomes stark and sparse. It is a record of emptiness, of vast stretches where life simply ceased to be. It is estimated that 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species vanished. This was the Great Dying, a punctuation mark of absolute finality. The vibrant tapestry of life was stripped back to a few essential threads. The world was a shadow of its former self, a ghostly echo of the fecundity that had come before. The evidence of this devastation is etched into the very rocks, a stark reminder of the fragility of existence. Yet even in this profound silence, life's stubborn insistence endured. Amidst the devastation, a few hardy lineages, a handful of resilient creatures, managed to cling to existence. These were not the dominant players of the previous era, but often smaller, more adaptable organisms, or those who found refuge in niche environments. Their survival was not a triumph of strength, but a testament to a particular kind of tenacity, a capacity to endure when all else succumbed. These few survivors, like fragile shoots pushing through ash, held the faint promise of a future. They were the inheritors of a broken world, the silent progenitors of those who would eventually rise to prominence in the epochs to come. To understand how life clawed its way back from this abyss, we must look to the very first stirrings of recovery and the creatures that would define the dawn of a new age, the age of reptiles. The air itself felt thin, carrying the dust of a world scoured clean. The Permian extinction had been absolute, a fiery purge that left the planet gasping. Yet life, in its most elemental form, endured. The early Triassic was a stark canvas, painted in shades of ochre and pale, bleached bone. Vast deserts stretched across the land, punctuated by salt pans and the occasional stubborn scrub. Rivers, when they flowed, were often ephemeral, carving temporary paths through the parched earth. The oceans, though slowly recovering, were still a shadow of their former selves, teeming with fewer species, their vibrant ecosystems yet to reawaken. It was a world stripped bare, where only the most resilient organisms could even dream of taking root. Into this quiet, almost desolate landscape, the first tentative shoots of a new era began to push through the hardened soil. The very process of recovery was a slow, deliberate unfurling, a testament to life's unyielding will to persist. But beneath this surface of barrenness, a profound transformation was already underway. The Permian had erased the old order, clearing the stage for a new evolutionary drama. The survivors, those few hardy species that had endured the cataclysm, were not merely treading water. They were the seeds of a coming abundance, poised to exploit the newly vacant niches. The air was still heavy with the memory of past devastation. Yet a subtle stirring began. Small, hardy plants, adapted to arid conditions, started to reclaim the land, their roots binding the loosened soil. These pioneers were not the lush, towering forests of the Carboniferous, but low-lying, tough vegetation that could withstand drought and intense solar radiation. This gradual recolonization of the terrestrial environment was the first critical step, providing the foundational layers upon which more complex life could eventually build. It was a process measured in millennia, a quiet revolution unfolding in the face of overwhelming conditions. Though the world felt empty, the biological machinery for renewal was already in motion. The true architects of this new age were not the humble survivors of the great dying, but a particular lineage of reptiles that had weathered the storm. These were the archosaurs, a group that possessed a remarkable evolutionary advantage. Their anatomy, particularly their gait and digestive systems, allowed them to thrive in the challenging Triassic climate. They were a diverse group, already showing the broad patterns that would lead to some of the most iconic creatures in Earth's history. Some were semi-aquatic, their streamlined bodies adapted to the sluggish rivers and shallow seas that dotted the landscape. Others were more terrestrial, their sturdy limbs carrying them across the dry plains. They represented a new peak of reptilian evolution, a successful gambit in the long game of survival. The archosaurs were not merely opportunistic. They were a biological force, poised to redefine the planet's dominant fauna. Within this burgeoning archosaur group, a crucial divergence began to take shape. While many archosaurs maintained a more robust, quadrupedal form, a subset began to experiment with bipedalism. These were not the immense titans of later epochs, but small, agile creatures, their bodies built for speed and efficiency. They moved on two legs, their tails providing balance, their forelimbs becoming increasingly freed for other tasks. This shift in locomotion was more than just a change in how they moved. It was a fundamental alteration of their ecological potential. It allowed for greater agility, a wider range of predatory behaviors, and the ability to exploit new food sources. These early bipedal archosaurs were the very first dinosaurs, though they would not be recognized as such for many millions of years to come. They were whispers of a coming storm, tiny figures darting through the ancient undergrowth, carrying within them the blueprint for a dynasty that would ultimately rule the world. Yet it was not just the reptilian lineage that was undergoing a profound, albeit less conspicuous, evolution. Hidden in the shadows of these emerging archosaurs and dinosaurs, another group was quietly charting its own course. These were the synapsids, specifically a small, shrew-like mammaliform lineage. While their reptilian cousins were basking in the sun and rapidly diversifying, these tiny creatures were masters of the nocturnal world. They lived in burrows, under roots, and within the dense foliage, wherever it existed, their small size and furtive habits allowing them to avoid predation, their internal temperature regulation, their fur, and their keen senses were all adaptations for survival in a world still dominated by larger, cold-blooded predators. They were the invisible threads in the fabric of life, representing a different evolutionary strategy, one of quiet persistence and eventual ascendancy. Their time had not yet come, but they were the silent progenitors of a lineage that would one day inherit the earth. To truly grasp the future of life, we must understand the deep evolutionary roots of these first small, warm-blooded creatures and how their hidden existence set the stage for the age of mammals. The Permian extinction had been a reset button for life on Earth, but the Triassic was the period of its profound reawakening. The arid landscapes and the slow, hesitant return of complex ecosystems were merely the backdrop for a remarkable evolutionary surge. The archosaurs, a group of reptiles with an uncanny knack for adaptation, began their ascent, laying the groundwork for the future rulers of the planet. This lineage would eventually splinter, giving rise to the fearsome crocodiles, the aerial pterosaurs, and most famously, the dinosaurs. Indeed, it was in this period that the very first dinosaurs emerged. These were not the giants we imagine today, but small, bipedal creatures darting through the undergrowth, their potential still largely untapped. But not all evolutionary success stories in the Triassic were about dominance. In the shadows, in the quiet spaces, a different kind of life was unfolding. The unassuming, shrew-like ancestors of mammals were also finding their footing. Their small size and nocturnal habits providing a crucial advantage in a world still ruled by reptiles. These tiny creatures, barely noticed by their larger contemporaries, held within them the promise of a future epoch. And to understand how these small, hidden mammals would eventually rise to global prominence, we must examine the environmental pressures and evolutionary innovations that allowed their lineage to persist and, eventually, to flourish. The echoes of the Permian cataclysm still hung in the air, a reminder of the fragility of existence. But the Triassic was not a period of scarcity. It was a period of opportunity. The vast emptiness left by the Great Dying was slowly being filled, not by the return of familiar forms, but by the emergence of entirely new ones. The arid, hostile landscape of the early Triassic, with its vast deserts and ephemeral rivers, was a crucible that forged a new kind of life. Into this challenging environment stepped the archosaurs, a group of reptiles that proved to be remarkably adaptable. Their robust physiology and efficient metabolisms allowed them to thrive where others faltered. They were the vanguard of a new reptilian dominance, their diverse forms adapting to land, water, and eventually the air. This evolutionary surge was nowhere more evident than than in the emergence of the very first dinosaurs. These were not the colossal beasts of popular imagination, but rather small, bipedal creatures built for speed and agility. They represented a significant evolutionary leap, a bipedal gait that freed their forelimbs and opened up new ecological possibilities. Yet their rise was not the only significant event. In the quiet, often overlooked corners of this recovering world, another lineage was quietly evolving. These were the small, shrew-like ancestors of mammals, creatures that lived in the shadows, their nocturnal existence a stark contrast to the sun-drenched world of the archosaurs. They were a testament to life's diverse strategies, a reminder that ascendancy does not always come with thunder. The archosaurian lineage, demonstrating an impressive capacity for innovation, began to diversify rapidly. Some developed powerful jaws and armored bodies, becoming the ancestors of crocodiles and their kin, masters of the liminal spaces between land and water. Others, lighter and more agile, took to the skies, their developing membranes and hollow bones paving the way for the pterosaurs. But it was the further branching of the archosaur family tree that truly captured the imagination of deep time. A specific group, characterized by their upright posture and increasingly sophisticated locomotion, began to dominate certain terrestrial environments. These were the earliest dinosaurs, still relatively small and perhaps not yet the apex predators of their time, but possessing the fundamental skeletal structure and predatory adaptations that would allow them to eventually achieve unparalleled success. Their bipedalism was a key innovation, offering greater speed and efficiency in covering territory and freeing their forelimbs for grasping and manipulating prey. Meanwhile, in the undergrowth, beneath the feet of these nascent giants, a different evolutionary narrative was unfolding. The early Triassic mammals, small and unassuming, survived by their wits and their ability to remain unseen. These were not the sleek, varied mammals of the Cenozoic, but rather simple, insectivorous creatures, their bodies no larger than a modern mouse or shrew. They possessed key mammalian traits: fur for insulation, likely endothermy allowing them to maintain a constant body temperature, and the ability to nourish their young with milk. These adaptations allowed them to exploit a niche that was largely inaccessible to the larger reptiles. They were the ultimate opportunists, thriving in the cool, dark hours of the night, scavenging for insects and small invertebrates, or perhaps even the air itself seemed to hum with a new vitality, a slow, resonant thrum of life reaching towards the sun. After the devastating silence of the Permian and the tentative reawakening of the Triassic, the Jurassic period arrived not with a whisper, but with the thunderous tread of giants. This was the age when Earth truly became the domain of the dinosaur, a time of unparalleled evolution in size, form, and sheer ecological dominance. the survivors of the Triassic had paved the way, offering glimpses of what was possible. But the Jurassic saw these possibilities explode into a breathtaking reality. It was a world sculpted by colossal herbivores and stalked by formidable carnivores, a planet where the very landscape felt animated by their presence. The iconic long-necked sauropods, names like Brontosaurus and Diplodocus, now etched into our collective imagination, were the vegetarians of this epoch. Imagine them, colossal, breathing mountains moving across the plains, their necks stretching impossibly high to browse the crowns of ancient cycads and ferns. Their sheer bulk was a defense, a living fortress against any predator. Yet even these gentle titans were not without their threats. Alongside them, the ground trembled with the passage of apex predators. Allosaurus, with its powerful jaws and serrated teeth, was a supreme hunter, perfectly adapted to bring down prey that dwarfed it in size. The diversity of theropods, the bipedal carnivores, was staggering. They ranged from the relatively nimble to the truly monstrous, each filling a specific ecological niche, from the swift hunters of smaller creatures to the fearsome predators capable of challenging even the largest sauropods. This intricate web of life, where immense herbivores and equally immense carnivores coexisted, defined the Jurassic ecosystem. But the dominion of these terrestrial behemoths was not absolute, as the sauropods browsed and the theropods stalked. A separate, yet intertwined, evolutionary story was unfolding in the skies. The pterosaurs, the winged reptiles, continued their ascent from the Triassic. They were not dinosaurs, but their contemporaries, masters of the air. Their evolution was a testament to adaptation, yielding an astonishing array of forms. Some, like Pterodactylus, were small and agile, flitting through the forests like prehistoric birds. Others, however, grew to truly awe-inspiring proportions, with wingspans that rivaled small airplanes. Creatures like Pterodactylus amassed a breathtaking display of aerial prowess. They soared on thermals, hunted fish over ancient seas, and became an integral part of the Jurassic panorama, a testament to the boundless potential of life to conquer new frontiers. Within this vibrant tapestry of life, a profound evolutionary shift was occurring, one that would reshape the future of animal life on Earth. Amongst the feathered theropods, the lineage that would eventually lead to birds was taking its tentative first steps. The most famous example, Archaeopteryx, a creature found preserved in fine-grained limestone, offered a glimpse into this transition. It possessed feathers, clearly visible in the fossil record, yet it also retained reptilian features, like a long bony tail and teeth. Its very existence blurred the lines between dinosaur and bird, posing a compelling question about the nature of evolution itself. Was this a bird that still held onto reptilian traits, or a dinosaur that was beginning to fly? The deep time record whispers of a complex, branching path, a gradual metamorphosis rather than a sudden leap, a story of feathers evolving perhaps for insulation, then display, and finally, for the miracle of flight. This intricate dance between ancient forms and emerging ones is a cornerstone of the Jurassic narrative. This period of spectacular biological innovation was inextricably linked to a colossal geological event, the breakup of Pangaea. The vast supercontinent, a single landmass that had dominated the planet for eons, began to fracture. Rift valleys tore across its surface, and the primordial oceans, ancient and restless, started to flood the widening gaps. This continental drift was not a gentle process. It was a slow, inexorable tearing apart, reshaping coastlines and altering atmospheric circulation. As Pangaea shattered into its constituent parts, what had once been a unified terrestrial environment became a collection of emerging landmasses, each with its own developing climate zones. Monsoonal patterns shifted, inland seas formed and receded, and the overall global climate began a slow but significant transformation. These tectonic tremors were not just reshaping the land, they were fundamentally altering the conditions under which life evolved, creating new opportunities and pressures that would continue to ripple through the ages, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would follow. The shifting continents were the silent architects of a changing world, and to understand the full impact of this geological upheaval, we must turn our gaze to the slow, deliberate forces that continued to sculpt the Earth's crust and atmosphere. The Jurassic giants had reached their zenith, their reign seemingly absolute. Yet, beneath the thundering footsteps of the sauropods and the soaring wings of the pterosaurs, the planet continued its relentless transformation. The Cretaceous period, the final act in the age of dinosaurs, was not merely a continuation of the Jurassic, but a dynamic era of immense change and diversification. It was a time when the familiar reptilian dominance faced new evolutionary pressures, and when the very foundations of the global ecosystem began to subtly, yet profoundly shift. New plant forms emerged, radically altering the food webs, and the relentless fragmentation of Pangaea continued to redraw the map of the world, creating isolated laboratories of evolution. The signature of the Cretaceous is one of incredible diversity. While the behemoths of the Jurassic still roamed, the period saw the rise of new dinosaurian titans, each adapted to their evolving world. Tyrannosaurus rex, a name that evokes primal fear and awe, stalked the later Cretaceous, its crushing bite a testament to the relentless pressure of natural selection in a world teeming with prey. Alongside these fearsome carnivores, a bewildering array of herbivores thrived. Triceratops, with its magnificent frill and formidable horns, became an iconic symbol of Cretaceous defense, a living fortress against the predators. hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, proliferated in vast herds, their specialized dental batteries allowing them to process tough plant matter with remarkable efficiency. This era witnessed an explosion of specialized forms, each a unique solution to the challenges and opportunities presented by a changing planet. But the most significant botanical innovation, one that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of life, was the emergence of flowering plants, the arrival of angiosperms. The flowering plants was a quiet revolution that would ultimately reshape the planet's biota. Their intricate reproductive strategies, involving flowers and fruits, offered new food sources and habitats. They carpeted the land in vibrant colors, attracting insects and birds, and their rapid spread created entirely new ecological niches. This botanical upheaval had a cascading effect up the food chain. Herbivores that could adapt to these new, nutrient-rich plants thrived, while those that could not struggled. This created a selective pressure that favored new adaptations, new feeding strategies, and ultimately, new species. The dinosaurian world, accustomed to a diet of ferns and cycads, had to contend with this vibrant new flora. This floral revolution was not just a change in scenery. It was a fundamental alteration of the Earth's pantry, a banquet laid out for those who could partake. While the terrestrial realm was undergoing such profound changes, the seas of the Cretaceous were also a hub of life and evolution. The ancient marine reptiles that had dominated earlier periods continued to evolve, but new players rose to prominence. Mosasaurs, enormous predatory lizards, became the apex predators of the oceans. Their powerful jaws and streamlined bodies perfectly adapted for hunting in the vast depths. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and flippers, patrolled the waters, while ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like reptiles, continued their ancient lineage. The marine environment was as dynamic as the land, a testament to life's persistent drive to explore and dominate every available niche. These ancient oceans, teeming with diverse life, were a mirror to the vibrant terrestrial ecosystems, both shaped by the same underlying forces of evolution and geological change. The relentless breakup of Pangaea continued to exert its influence, isolating continents and fostering unique evolutionary lineages. Australia, South America, and Africa, once connected, drifted further apart, allowing distinct flora and fauna to develop. This geographical isolation acted as a powerful engine of speciation, leading to the emergence of endemic species found nowhere else on Earth. The climate, too, continued to be influenced by these tectonic shifts and by changes in atmospheric composition. While the Cretaceous generally experienced a warmer climate than today, there were fluctuations, periods of increased volcanic activity, and shifts in ocean currents that brought about localized changes in temperature and rainfall. This constant interplay between geology, climate, and biology created a dynamic, ever-evolving planet, a preview of the even greater transformations that lay ahead. The world was a vast, interconnected experiment in life, and the seeds of future eras were being sown in this fertile, fluxing landscape. To truly appreciate the pressures that shaped this world and what came next, we must consider the forces that were not only creating new life, but also setting the stage for its dramatic end, a transition that leads us into the age of mammals. The Cretaceous was a time of burgeoning beauty, a vibrant tapestry woven from newly evolved threads. It was during this era that the world began to resemble the palettes we recognize today, thanks to the quiet revolution of flowering plants, the angiosperms. These plants, with their intricate structures and ingenious reproductive strategies, did more than just add color. They fundamentally reshaped terrestrial ecosystems. Their success was intricately linked to the rise of insects. Bees, butterflies, and beetles, drawn by nectar and pollen, became vital partners in pollination, forming a remarkable coevolutionary dance. This partnership allowed angiosperms to diversify with astonishing speed, spreading across continents and outcompeting older forms of plant life. Forests transformed. Instead of vast, monotonous seas of ferns and conifers, landscapes began to feature varied ground cover, undergrowth, and the flowering trees that would eventually dominate. This newfound complexity provided new niches, new food sources, and new challenges for the animal kingdom. The very air and the scent of blossoms changed. But amidst this flourishing, a darker, more ancient power held sway. The age of dinosaurs was reaching its zenith, and in its twilight, a creature of primal terror commanded the scene. Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king, was not merely a predator. It was an ecological force. Its immense size, powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, and keen senses made it the undisputed apex predator of its time. Imagine its thunderous footsteps shaking the earth, its gaze sweeping across the plains, a living embodiment of the era's raw power. T-Rex and its kin exerted immense pressure on herbivorous dinosaurs, driving their evolution towards greater size, speed, or defensive adaptations. This constant biological arms race, a dance of predator and prey, shaped the very fabric of Cretaceous ecosystems, pushing species to their limits and fostering an incredible diversity of forms. The world was a stage for these colossal dramas, a prelude to an abrupt curtain call, and then the sky delivered its judgment. For millions of years, Earth had been a relatively stable place, punctuated by the slow march of evolution and the gradual shaping of continents. But in a fleeting moment, the cosmos intervened with unimaginable violence. The Chicxulub impactor, an asteroid or comet estimated to be over 6 miles wide, slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. A blinding flash, hotter than the sun, vaporized everything for hundreds of miles around. The impact unleashed energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, triggering colossal earthquakes and tsunamis that scourged coastlines across the globe. But the true devastation was only just beginning, setting the stage for not just the end of an era, but a profound reshaping of life itself. What followed was a period of global darkness and freezing temperatures, a smoldering planet choking on its own destruction. The dust and debris ejected into the atmosphere by the Chicxulub impact blocked out the sun for years, plunging the planet into an extended, freezing twilight. This impact winter was a catastrophe for plant life, suffocated by darkness and cold, severing the base of the food chain. Widespread wildfires, ignited by the impact's fiery breath, and molten rock raining down from the sky, raged across continents, further consuming the already weakened ecosystems. As the skies cleared, revealing a profoundly altered world, the survivors faced an unimaginable struggle for existence. The reign of the dinosaurs, so dominant for so long, was brought to an abrupt and fiery end, leaving a world poised for new life, but also scarred. As we emerge from this smoldering aftermath, the question becomes, what forces would now rise to fill the vacuum? And how would life begin its slow, arduous journey back from the brink? The answer lies in understanding the subtle, yet profound, shifts that allowed a new class of creatures to seize their chance, ushering in what we call the age of mammals. Make sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'll see you in the next one.